The wind was strong that night. Cold rain hit the broken streets as people hurried home, holding umbrellas and warm coats. But one man sat alone under a bridge, his back against the cold wall, his face hidden behind a torn hoodie. His name was Tom. He had no home, no family, and almost no hope left. Tom had been living on the streets for almost 2 years. Every night was the same, cold, hungry, and full of silence. His old shoes were wet from the rain, and his thin blanket could not keep him warm. Cars passed by, but no one looked at him. He was invisible to the world. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few coins and a single crumpled note. It was all he had left, $8. That money meant food for the next day, or maybe a cup of coffee to warm his hands. He stared at it for a long time, then put it back carefully. He had learned to protect small things because small things were all he had. The night grew darker. Tom pulled his blanket closer and tried to sleep, but the cold kept biting his skin. His stomach made noises and his hands shook. He thought about his old life, the time when he had a job, a small apartment, and friends to laugh with. But that was long ago, before he lost everything. A few months back, Tom worked at a small repair shop. But when the shop closed, he couldn't pay rent. One bad month became 2, and soon his landlord threw him out. His friends stopped calling. His phone broke. Life slowly pushed him to the edge, and one day he simply had nowhere left to go. Now his only home was the city's cold nights. It was past midnight when he heard a strange sound, a motorcycle engine coughing and stopping nearby. Tom lifted his head and looked down the street. Under the yellow streetlight, he saw a big man trying to push a heavy bike toward the gas station. The man looked strong, with tattoos on his arms and a black leather jacket that said Hell's Angels. Tom had heard stories about bikers like them, tough, dangerous, and wild. People usually stayed far away, but Tom didn't see danger. He saw someone who looked tired, wet, and in trouble. The biker kicked the bike again and shouted something under his breath. He looked around, clearly angry that no one was helping. The gas station nearby was closed for the night. The streets were empty except for Tom. For a few minutes, Tom watched him struggle. Then he stood up, wrapping his blanket tight around his shoulders, and walked slowly toward the man. "Hey," Tom said softly. "You okay, man?" The biker looked up, surprised. His face was rough, with a long beard and cold eyes. But when he saw Tom, his expression softened a little. "Ran out of gas," he said. "And my wallet's gone. Must have dropped it somewhere." Tom looked at the bike, then at the man. "That's bad luck," he said. "Station's closed too," the biker sighed. "Yeah, just my day." Tom hesitated. He felt the small weight of the $8 in his pocket. It was all he had, his only chance to eat tomorrow. But he looked at the biker again, standing there in the rain, far from home with no help. He reached into his pocket slowly, pulled out the $8, and handed it over. "Here," Tom said. "It's not much, but maybe enough to get some gas from the machine." The biker blinked, confused. "You're giving me your money?" he asked. Tom smiled a little. "Yeah, you need it more than me right now." The man stared at him for a long time. "You don't even know me," he said. Tom shrugged. "Don't need to. People help people. That's how the world should be." The biker didn't say anything. He just took the money quietly, walked to the machine, and filled his tank. When he came back, he reached out his hand. "Name's Rick," he said. "Tom," he replied. Rick looked at him again, shaking his head in disbelief. "You know, no one's done something like that for me in a long time," he said. "I won't forget this." Tom smiled again, though his lips were shaking from the cold. "Just help someone else someday," he said. "That'll be enough." Rick nodded, started his bike, and before leaving said, "You take care of yourself, Tom. I'll see you again." Tom waved weakly as the motorcycle roared away into the night. When the sound disappeared, he stood alone again under the bridge, his pocket now empty. But strangely, his heart felt full. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel useless. He had helped someone, even if it meant losing his last bit of money. He sat down again, pulling the blanket around him, and whispered to himself, "Maybe kindness still matters." The rain slowed down. The moon came out from behind the clouds, and Tom looked up at it. It looked calm and gentle, shining softly over the wet road. He smiled and closed his eyes, not knowing that his small act of kindness was about to change his life forever. The next morning came slowly. The sun rose weak and pale, hiding behind gray clouds. The city was waking up, cars honking, people rushing to work, and the smell of fresh coffee drifting from small shops. But under the same bridge, Tom sat quietly, still wrapped in his old blanket. His body was stiff from the cold night. He had not slept much. He opened his eyes and stared at the street for a while. The world moved fast around him, yet he felt like time had stopped for him long ago. He touched his empty pocket and remembered last night. The biker, the gas station, and the $8 he had given away. That was all he had. His last $8, now it was gone. Tom's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since the morning before. He looked around for an empty bottle or a can he could sell for coins. He found a few, but not enough to buy food. Still, when he thought about the biker's face, the way the man had looked surprised and thankful, Tom smiled. It felt good to help someone even if he had nothing left. He walked toward a nearby park, dragging his small bag with him. Inside the bag were a few old clothes, a toothbrush, and a photo of his parents. They had passed away years ago. Tom sometimes looked at that photo when he felt lonely. It reminded him that once, someone loved him. At the park, he sat on a wooden bench and watched people pass by. A mother pushed her child in a stroller. A couple laughed while feeding pigeons. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go, everyone except Tom. He was just part of the background, a shadow people didn't want to see. Still, he didn't let sadness take over. He whispered softly, "Maybe today something good will happen." Around noon, Tom walked back toward the city center. He passed by a diner where he used to eat years ago. The smell of eggs and coffee made him stop and close his eyes. He could almost taste it in his mind. He looked through the glass window and saw happy faces eating breakfast. He wished he could just walk in, sit down, and be treated like a normal person again. A kind waitress inside noticed him and gave a small smile. She filled a paper cup with water and handed it to him through the door. "Here you go," she said. "Stay warm, okay?" Tom smiled gratefully. "Thank you, miss." It wasn't food, but it was kindness. And kindness meant a lot. The day moved slowly. Tom walked around looking for some work, maybe to help clean a shop window or carry boxes for a store. But no one needed him that day. His feet hurt from walking. By evening, he returned to the same bridge, feeling tired and hungry. The sun was setting now, painting the sky orange and red. The air grew colder again. Tom sat down, pulled out the old photo of his parents, and whispered, "I did something good, Mom. I helped someone last night. I hope you're proud of me." As he sat there, he heard the rumble of a motorcycle engine far away. For a moment, his heart jumped. Could it be the same man? But then the sound faded and no one appeared. Tom sighed. He probably forgot, he said quietly. But even then, he didn't regret his choice. He believed in something simple. You help others not because you expect something back, but because it's right. He wrapped himself in his blanket again, thinking of the biker. He remembered the man's jacket with the bold red and white patch, Hell's Angels. Tom didn't know much about bikers, but he knew they were a big group, like a family. Maybe the man was far away by now, telling someone about the strange homeless guy who gave him money. The night came fast. The street lights flickered on and the noise of the city faded into soft whispers. Tom tried to sleep, but the hunger made it hard. He felt weak. His hands were cold. He pulled the blanket tighter, trying to block the wind. He looked up at the sky and spoke softly to himself. "I hope that biker's safe. Maybe one day someone will help me too. But if not, that's okay." The stars began to appear one by one. The city slept, but Tom stayed awake, his mind full of memories and small dreams. He imagined himself sitting in a warm room, eating hot soup, maybe even having a friend to talk to. He smiled at the thought before closing his eyes. In another part of the city, at that same moment, the biker named Rick sat in a diner surrounded by his friends. He told them about the homeless man who gave him his last $8. The other bikers couldn't believe it. "A homeless man did that?" one asked. "Yeah," Rick said quietly, staring at his coffee. "He didn't even know me. He just helped." There was silence for a moment. Then Rick said something that made everyone listen closely. "I told him I'd see him again, and I will." Back under the bridge, Tom didn't know that fate was already working behind the scenes. He didn't know that his small act of kindness had started a chain of events that would soon shake his entire life. He only knew hunger and cold that night. But above him, the stars seemed to shine brighter. almost as if the universe itself was watching and waiting for what was about to come. Tom fell asleep slowly, unaware that the next sunrise would bring roaring engines, hundreds of bikers, and the biggest surprise of his life. The morning sun rose slowly behind the tall buildings. Golden light touched the wet roads and cold sidewalks. But under the bridge, Tom sat up with a groan. His body hurt from sleeping on the hard ground. His blanket was damp from the night dew. He rubbed his eyes, trying to wake himself fully. He looked around. The city was alive again. Cars rushed by, buses honked. People talked loudly into phones. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone except Tom. He stretched his arms and whispered, "Another day. Maybe today will be better." He reached into his pocket, forgetting for a second that it was empty. Then he remembered his last $8 was gone. He had given it to the biker. He smiled faintly, though his stomach ached with hunger. "I did the right thing," he said to himself. "That's what matters." Tom stood up, folded his blanket, and started walking toward the park. His shoes made soft, wet sounds on the sidewalk. The wind was cold, but he was used to it now. He passed by people sipping coffee, children laughing on their way to school, and delivery men unloading boxes from trucks. He felt invisible again, like a ghost moving through a world that no longer saw him. At the park, he sat on a bench. Birds hopped near his feet, pecking at crumbs. Tom watched them with a soft smile. He liked birds. They were free. They could go anywhere, while he was stuck in the same place every day. He remembered his life before everything fell apart. His small apartment with peeling paint, his old job fixing bicycles, and his kind neighbor, Mrs. Doyle, who always gave him leftover soup. Life wasn't perfect, but it was warm. Now everything he had was just a memory. After a while, Tom walked to the gas station nearby, the same one where he met the biker. He looked at the spot where Rick's motorcycle had broken down. The puddles were still there, reflecting the morning sky. Tom stood there quietly, thinking about that moment. The man's tired eyes, his rough hands, the loud engine starting again after he gave him gas money. He wondered where Rick was now. Maybe far away, riding on open highways, surrounded by friends. Maybe he forgot all about the homeless man who helped him. Tom didn't blame him if he did. Life moves fast for people who have homes. For people like him, every day was slow. As he stood there lost in thought, the gas station worker came out. "Hey buddy, you can't just stand around here all day," the man said. Tom nodded politely. "Sorry, just leaving." He walked away and found a small alley behind a bakery. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. His stomach growled loudly. He peeked inside the trash bin and found half a sandwich wrapped in paper. It was cold, but he didn't care. He sat on the curb and ate it slowly, savoring every bite. A cat came close and meowed. Tom smiled, broke off a piece of bread and placed it on the ground. "Here, little one," he said. The cat purred and ate beside him. For a moment, Tom felt less lonely. The day passed quietly. By afternoon, the clouds turned gray again. A light drizzle began. Tom found shelter under the same bridge. He sat down, holding his blanket close, watching cars pass. Raindrops danced on the road. He began to think deeply about his life. "I used to be like them," he whispered, watching people drive by. "I used to rush, worry, complain. I didn't know how lucky I was." He closed his eyes and rested his head against the cold wall. "Maybe I'm meant to stay here. Maybe helping that man was my purpose." But somewhere inside, a small voice whispered, "No, this isn't the end." The rain grew heavier. Thunder rumbled far away. Tom's blanket got wet again. He didn't move. He was too tired. The world felt too big and he felt too small. He thought about his parents. His mother used to say, "Even when the night is dark, the sun still waits behind the clouds." He smiled at the memory and whispered, "Maybe she's right." Hours passed. The rain finally stopped. The night grew calm again. Streetlights reflected on the wet ground. Tom watched a small group of bikers drive past in the distance. Their engines were loud, echoing through the street. For a moment, his heart skipped a beat. The sound reminded him of Rick's motorcycle. He stood up, trying to see where they went, but they disappeared into the darkness. He sighed and sat back down. "Probably not him," he said softly. But deep in his heart, he felt something strange, like a quiet promise floating in the air. He didn't know that far away, in another part of the city, Rick was thinking about him too. The biker couldn't forget the homeless man's face. He had told his story to his brothers in the club, and they all agreed. Tom wasn't just another man on the street. He was a soul with courage. That night, Rick gathered his fellow riders. The room was filled with the smell of leather, oil, and smoke. "Tomorrow morning," he said, his voice firm, "we ride. All of us. I found where that man stays. We're going to show him that real kindness doesn't vanish." Back under the bridge, Tom fell asleep slowly, the sound of raindrops still echoing in his mind. He had no idea that the next sunrise would bring hundreds of motorcycles roaring down his street, heading straight for him. The morning he thought would be empty was about to change everything. The next morning began quietly. The city was calm after the rain. Drops of water still hung from tree leaves shining in the morning sun. Under the bridge, Tom slowly opened his eyes. His blanket was still wet, but the air felt lighter, cleaner. He stretched and looked around, wondering what the day would bring. He felt weaker than usual. His stomach had been empty for almost 2 days now. Still, he smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "I'm still here. That's something." He stood up and walked toward the park again, dragging his old bag. His shoes made a soft scraping sound on the wet sidewalk. He passed a little cafe where the smell of fresh coffee drifted out. It made his stomach twist with hunger. Through the window, he saw people eating breakfast, laughing, and reading newspapers. For a moment, Tom wished he could walk in, sit down, and just be normal again. But instead, he kept walking. He reached the park bench, sat down, and looked up at the sky. The sun broke through the clouds, warm and bright. For the first time in a while, he felt peaceful. Maybe things would get better. Maybe the universe hadn't forgotten him yet. Then, far away, he heard something. At first, it was faint. A deep rumbling sound. It came from the edge of the city, like thunder rolling closer. Tom lifted his head and frowned. The sound grew louder, heavier, sharper. It wasn't thunder, it was engines, hundreds of them. The noise filled the air, echoing off the buildings. Birds flew away in panic. People on the sidewalk stopped and turned to look down the street. The ground trembled slightly under the power of the engines. Tom stood up slowly, confused. He shaded his eyes with his hand and looked down the long road. From far away, a wave of motorcycles was coming, one after another, filling the street in perfect formation. The morning sun reflected off their chrome, making them shine like fire. "What's happening?" someone whispered nearby. A little boy shouted, "Look, bikers!" Tom's eyes widened. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Dozens turned to hundreds, men and women wearing black jackets with the red and white Hell's Angels symbol on the back. The sound of their engines shook the ground. It was like a storm made of steel and thunder. Cars stopped. People stepped aside. Some took pictures with their phones. But Tom just stood frozen, his heart pounding. The motorcycles slowed down near the park. Then, one by one, they began to stop. The noise faded into deep growls as engines turned off. The smell of gasoline and leather filled the air. Tom stepped back nervously. What is this?" he whispered. Then he saw him. From the front of the group, a tall man took off his helmet. His beard was wet from the morning mist. He wore the same jacket, Hell's Angels, with patches of red and white. It was Rick. Tom's heart jumped. Rick smiled when he saw him. "There he is," he shouted, pointing at Tom. "That's the man I told you about." The other bikers turned their heads toward Tom. Their eyes softened. Some nodded with respect. Others smiled proudly. Tom felt confused and scared. "Me," he said quietly. "What's going on?" Rick walked up to him, boots clicking on the wet road. He stopped right in front of Tom, his face serious but kind. "You remember me?" he asked. Tom nodded slowly. "The guy with the broken bike." Rick grinned. "Yeah, the guy who ran out of gas. You gave me your last $8. Tom looked down shyly. "It wasn't much," he said. Rick shook his head. "It was everything you had. And you didn't even know me. You didn't ask for anything. You just helped. That kind of heart. That's rare, brother." Tom blinked, trying to understand. "Brother?" he repeated. Rick turned to the massive crowd of bikers behind him. "Listen up, everyone," he shouted. "This man, Tom, gave away the only money he had to help me when nobody else would. He didn't care who I was, what I looked like, or what patch I wore. He just saw someone who needed help." The crowd cheered loudly. The sound was like thunder again, but this time it wasn't scary. It was powerful, warm, alive. Tom stood there, eyes wide, not knowing what to say. He could feel tears building in his eyes. Rick put his hand on Tom's shoulder. "You gave me $8, so today we're giving something back." Rick turned and waved his hand. Instantly, several bikers stepped forward carrying boxes and bags. They placed them in front of Tom. Clothes, food, blankets, and supplies. Another biker rolled a small black suitcase forward. He opened it. Inside was a thick stack of money. Tom's mouth fell open. What is this?" Rick smiled. "This is from all of us. Every single one of these brothers and sisters put something in. You helped one man. Today 300 people came to help you." The crowd clapped again. Some whistled. Some shouted, "You're one of us now, Tom." Tom stood frozen, tears now falling freely. He tried to speak, but his voice shook. "I don't know what to say." Rick grinned. "Don't say anything. Just know this, kindness never disappears. It always finds its way back." Tom nodded slowly, his heart beating fast. He looked at the bikers, rough faces, tattoos, leather jackets, but all he saw now were smiles. Real, honest smiles. He felt warmth spread through his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. The noise, the engines, the crowd. It all faded for a moment. All he could hear was the sound of his own heart, whispering, "You mattered, Tom, you always did." That morning, the man who had nothing found himself surrounded by 300 strangers who treated him like family. The same city that once ignored him now stopped and watched. Because kindness, no matter how small, had finally been seen. For a long moment, Tom couldn't move. He just stood there, surrounded by hundreds of bikers, his eyes wide and full of disbelief. The noise of engines had quieted down, but his heart was still racing. The city around them seemed frozen. People on the sidewalks had stopped walking, cars had stopped moving. Everyone was watching this unbelievable scene. Tom looked at the biker named Rick, still trying to understand what was happening. "You really came back," he said softly. Rick smiled, his beard dripping with morning dew. "I told you I would," he replied. "You helped me when no one else did. Now it's our turn." Tom looked down at the boxes and bags lying in front of him. Clean clothes, blankets, food, and even new shoes. His eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. Rick shook his head. "You do, brother. You gave when you had nothing. That's worth more than gold." A few bikers stepped closer, carrying hot coffee and sandwiches. One of them, a tall woman with short hair and tattoos on her arms, smiled warmly. "Eat first," she said. "You look like you haven't had a meal in days." Tom's hands shook as he took the sandwich. "Thank you," he said in a trembling voice. He took a bite and felt the warmth fill his body. It was the first real food he'd eaten in almost 2 days. As he ate, the bikers cheered, laughed, and clapped him on the back. The air was full of energy and emotion, the sound of engines mixed with laughter. It didn't feel like a gang. It felt like a family reunion. After a while, Rick raised his hand and the noise settled down. He looked at Tom with a serious expression. "There's more," he said. Tom blinked in surprise. "More?" Rick nodded and pointed to a black pickup truck parked nearby. The back of the truck was covered with a large blue tarp. "We brought something special for you." 2 bikers jumped down from their bikes and pulled the tarp away. Under it was a brand new sleeping bag, a camping stove, boxes of canned food, and even a small radio. Tom covered his mouth with his hands. "I don't know what to say." Rick smiled. "Say you'll keep believing in good people." Tom laughed softly through his tears. "I already do." Then Rick handed him a small envelope. "And this," he said. Tom opened it slowly. Inside was a note and a small stack of cash. The note read, "For the man who reminded us that kindness still exists. From your new brothers and sisters, the Hells Angels." Tom looked up, speechless. You gave me money?" Rick nodded. "Enough to get you a room for a few weeks, buy food, and maybe start again. You can't sleep under that bridge forever." Tom felt his knees weaken. He sat on the edge of the curb, holding the envelope to his chest. He had never cried so freely before. "Why me?" he asked softly. "There are so many others like me." Rick crouched down beside him. "Because you didn't ask for anything," he said. "That's the kind of person the world needs to notice." Another biker, a big man with a kind smile, stepped forward. "We talked to a friend who owns a diner nearby," he said. "He's willing to give you a small job, washing dishes, cleaning tables. It's not much, but it's a start." Tom stared at him in shock. "A job, really?" Rick nodded. "Yeah, and a warm place to stay. The owner said he's got a small room upstairs you can rent cheap. We already paid your first month. Tom's hands covered his face. Tears fell fast now. I don't even know how to thank you all. Rick put a hand on his shoulder. You already did when you gave away that $8. For a moment, no one spoke. The city noise faded again. All Tom could hear was the beating of his heart. Then slowly the crowd of bikers began to clap. One by one they started their engines, filling the street with the thunder of power and pride. Rick turned to his crew and shouted, "This man is proof that kindness still lives." The crowd roared back with cheers and raised fists. "Brother Tom!" someone shouted. "Brother Tom!" Tom laughed and cried at the same time. The nickname echoed through the street like music. He had been invisible for so long, but now people were chanting his name. When the engines finally started to move again, Rick stayed behind. He looked at Tom and smiled softly. "You're not alone anymore, brother. If you ever need us, just ask. We're family now." Tom nodded, still holding the envelope. "I'll never forget this," he said. "Never." Rick put on his helmet, revved his engine, and said, "And we'll never forget you." Tom, the man who gave his last $8. With that, the bikers rode away, their engines filling the sky with thunder once more. The sound faded slowly into the distance, leaving behind quiet streets and one man whose life had just changed forever. Tom stood there for a long time, looking down the road where the motorcycles disappeared. The wind brushed his face, carrying the faint echo of their engines. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Maybe miracles really do happen." That night, he didn't sleep under the bridge. He checked into a small motel room with clean sheets, a hot shower, and a roof over his head. As he lay in bed, he whispered, "Thank you, Rick. Thank you all." For the first time in years, Tom fell asleep not with fear but with peace, and a heart full of hope for tomorrow. The morning sun broke through the curtains of a small motel room. Its golden light touched the walls, the bed, and the man who lay sleeping there. For the first time in years, Tom woke up in a real bed. No cold concrete, no street noise, no fear of rain. He opened his eyes slowly, feeling the soft pillow under his head. For a moment, he didn't move, afraid it might all be a dream. But when he sat up and saw the little coffee machine on the table and the clean towel hanging by the bathroom door, he smiled. It was real. Tom stood up and looked at himself in the small mirror above the sink. His hair was messy, his beard long, but his eyes looked different, brighter, alive. "You're still here," he whispered to his reflection. "And things are changing." He washed his face with warm water, a simple thing he hadn't felt in months. The warmth made him sigh with relief. Then he opened the bag the bikers had given him. Inside were new clothes, jeans, a clean shirt, and even a jacket. He put them on slowly, like someone preparing for a new chapter of life. After finishing his simple breakfast, he looked at the note Rick had left with the money. It said, "Go to Benny's diner, tell him Rick sent you." Tom folded the note carefully, put it in his pocket, and stepped outside. The air smelled fresh and the city looked different today. It wasn't cruel or cold anymore. The streets that once ignored him now seemed full of color and sound. People smiled at him as he walked past. For once, he didn't feel invisible. When he reached Benny's diner, he stood outside for a minute, nervous. The small restaurant had red booths and silver doors. The smell of eggs, bacon, and coffee filled the air. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. A man behind the counter wearing an apron looked up and smiled. "Morning. What can I get you?" Tom hesitated. Actually, Rick sent me." The man's smile grew wider. "Ah, so you're the famous Tom. Come on in, brother. I've been expecting you." Tom blinked, surprised. "You have?" "Sure have," Benny said, wiping his hands on a towel. "Rick told me what you did. You've got a good heart. We need people like that around here." Tom lowered his head shyly. "I don't know much about restaurants." "That's fine," Benny said kindly. "You'll start small, washing dishes, cleaning tables. Honest work. You'll get paid every week. And if you keep showing up, maybe we'll move you up." Tom's eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you. I'll work hard, I promise," and he did. Days turned into weeks. Every morning, Tom came early, ready to work. He washed dishes, swept floors, wiped counters, and smiled at every customer. People started to notice him, the quiet man with kind eyes and gentle manners. Some regulars even began greeting him by name. "Morning, Tom," a woman would say. "Hey, Tom, best coffee in town, right?" Another would joke. He would laugh, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. At night, he went back to his motel room, tired but happy. He saved his pay carefully, using only what he needed. The rest went into a small envelope he kept under his pillow. Each dollar felt like a piece of hope, a step toward something better. One evening, while closing the diner, Benny came over and said, "You've been doing great, Tom. How about you move into the small room upstairs? It's cheaper than the motel and closer to work." Tom's face lit up. "You mean it?" "Of course," Benny said. "It's not big, but it's yours." That night, Tom moved into the little room above the diner. It had one bed, a window that looked out at the street, and a tiny table. To him, it was a palace. He stood by the window, watching cars pass below, and whispered, "Thank you, God. I didn't think I'd ever come this far." Every few days, he heard the rumble of motorcycle engines passing by. It always made him smile. Sometimes one of the bikers would stop by the diner, Rick or one of his brothers. They would drink coffee, laugh with Benny, and check on Tom. "How's life treating you, brother?" Rick asked one afternoon, leaning on the counter. Tom grinned. "Better than I ever dreamed. I've got a job, a place to sleep, and friends who care." Rick nodded proudly. "You earned it, man. Don't ever forget, you did this. You gave first." Tom shook his head. "No, Rick. You showed me that kindness never dies." The two men laughed and clinked coffee mugs together. As weeks passed, Tom began helping others too. If a homeless person came by the diner, he always made sure they got a warm meal. If someone dropped a coin, he picked it up and gave it back. He never forgot where he came from. One night, as he closed the diner and turned off the lights, he looked at his reflection in the window. The man looking back wasn't broken anymore. He had purpose, dignity, and peace. He whispered softly, "This is my new beginning." The street outside was quiet, but he could still hear, far in the distance, the familiar roar of motorcycles. It made him smile. The sound reminded him that life had a strange way of working. One small act of kindness could open the door to 1,000 more. That night, Tom went to bed with a full stomach, a warm heart, and a dream that tomorrow might just be brighter than today. And somewhere across the city, a group of bikers raised their glasses around a campfire, toasting to one simple truth: kindness never goes unnoticed. The morning sun poured through the window of the small room above the diner. Tom woke up to the smell of coffee drifting from downstairs. Birds sang on the power lines outside, and the sound made him smile. Life had changed completely. He got out of bed, washed his face, and looked in the mirror. The man who stared back wasn't the same tired soul who once slept under bridges. His hair was trimmed, his eyes were clear, and there was a quiet peace in his face. He wasn't rich, but he was alive, warm, and proud of who he had become. Every morning, Tom went down to the diner before sunrise. He wiped tables, cleaned windows, and prepared the coffee machines. When customers arrived, he greeted them with a smile that came straight from his heart. People loved him not because he worked fast, but because he made everyone feel welcome. "Morning, Tom," they would say, and he would reply, "Morning, friend. Hope your day's good already." Over the months, Tom became part of the diner's story. Everyone in town knew about the man who once had nothing and now worked with quiet strength and kindness. Some called him Brother Tom, the same name the bikers had given him that unforgettable day. One chilly afternoon, Tom was cleaning the tables when he heard the familiar sound: motorcycle engines. His heart jumped. He ran to the window, and there they were, the Hell's Angels coming down the street loud and proud. The customers turned to look as the group parked in front of the diner. Tom rushed outside, wiping his hands on his apron, smiling wide. "Rick!" he shouted. The tall biker took off his helmet and grinned. "Tom, my man." They hugged tightly, like brothers who hadn't seen each other in years. The other bikers laughed and patted Tom on the back. "Look at you, all cleaned up and working," one of them said. Tom laughed. "You wouldn't believe how good it feels to wake up in a warm bed." Rick smiled proudly. "I do believe it, brother. You've earned every bit of it." They all sat inside the diner, filling the place with laughter and the smell of leather and gasoline. Benny, the owner, brought them coffee and pie. The other customers whispered in amazement, The same tough bikers who once scared people were now laughing with the kind man who used to be homeless. After eating, Rick stood up and raised his mug. "To Tom," he said loudly. "The man who gave more than money, he gave us hope." Everyone cheered. Even the customers clapped. Tom blushed, shaking his head. No. "I didn't do much," he said. Rick laughed. "You changed more than you think. You reminded a bunch of rough riders what kindness really means." Tom smiled, his eyes shining. "And you reminded me that no good thing ever dies. It just waits to come back." The bikers spent the afternoon with him, helping around the diner and sharing stories. Before they left, Rick handed Tom a leather vest. On the back was a small patch that read, "Brother of the Road, Hell's Angels Family." Tom stared at it, speechless. "You're serious?" he asked. Rick nodded. "You'll always be one of us, brother. Doesn't matter if you ride or not. You've got the spirit." Tears filled Tom's eyes. I don't know what to say." Rick put a hand on his shoulder. "Just keep living the way you do. That's all we need from you." The engines roared again as they rode off, waving goodbye. Tom stood outside the diner until the sound faded into the distance. He looked down at the vest in his hands and smiled. That night, after closing the diner, Tom sat by the window in his room. The city lights shimmered outside. He thought about his journey, the hunger, the cold nights, the strangers who became friends, and how one small act of kindness had turned his life upside down. He picked up a small notebook and began to write. His handwriting was shaky, but his words were full of heart. "I once had nothing but $8 in hope. I gave both away. That day I learned that kindness is never lost, it just travels, finding its way back to you when you need it most." He smiled as he wrote, feeling peace deep inside. Then he closed the notebook and looked out the window again. A gentle wind moved the curtains. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he could hear the faint roar of motorcycles. Tom whispered softly, "Thank you, Rick. Thank you for proving that the world still has good hearts." The moon hung high in the sky, silver and calm. Below it, the streets that once felt cold now looked warm and alive. The next morning, Tom walked through the city carrying 2 bags of food. He went back to the same bridge where he once slept. A young homeless man sat there, cold and tired, much like Tom had been. "Hey," Tom said gently, sitting beside him. "You eaten today?" The man shook his head. Tom opened the bags and handed him one. "Here, you need this more than I do." The man looked surprised. "Why are you helping me?" Tom smiled softly. "Because once someone helped me, and now it's my turn." The man stared at him, confused but grateful. Tom patted his shoulder and stood up. "Remember this," he said quietly. "What you give away with love always comes back." He walked away slowly, the sun rising behind him, painting the sky gold. The city around him came alive again, cars moving, people hurrying. But Tom walked calmly, carrying peace in his heart. For him, this wasn't just a new life, it was a mission. He would keep spreading the message that had saved him. Kindness is never wasted. It always finds its way home.